Today I'm going to read to you from one of my favorite books. It was when I was a boy, or teenager rather, and it still is. I love it very much, and I think you can see it, the ways in which it influenced my writing of Mona of the Manor. It's by Dodie Smith, who was a 20th century, her life spanned the 20th century basically, English playwright. I was always rather sorry in the 80s that when I heard that she lived in England, that I didn't get out to see her, because I would have had lots of adoration for her, but I didn't. I did have a connection with her in that she and her husband, Alec Beesley, he was a conscientious objector, and they thought they'd have a better chance of that happening in America than in England. That's how much things have changed. So they settled in Malibu and several places in California, and at the time met my friend Christopher Isherwood. Chris remembered them running on the beach with their dog. Their dogs were Pongo and Perdita, which, if you know 101 Dalmatians, one of Dodie Smith's most famous novels, you know that's the name of the dogs. Of course, I was friends with Christopher Isherwood, but sadly, I never had the opportunity to get an introduction to Dodie Smith. I'm sure I could have gotten one. She died in 1990, and she was herself 90-something, I think. At any rate, she was a famous English playwright, among other things. At one point, she had three comedies in production in the West End at the same time. And her most famous books are because of the movies that were made out of them, were 101 Dalmatians, and lesser so that I didn't like the adaptation of I Capture the Castle. It didn't seem to capture the essence of the books to me, but I think that was about 10 or 15 years ago that happened. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to read to you a better part of the first chapter of I Captured the Castle, so you can get something of a flavor. I Captured the Castle is supposedly a series of notebooks that Cassandra Maupin, the heroine of I Captured the Castle, keeps herself. So it's this kind of diary. So this first one is called The Sixpenny Book, because she did it in a cheap book, I think. Anyway, it has a first sentence that is one of the more memorable in literature, and one of the reasons I love this book. I am sitting in the kitchen sink. That is, my feet are in it, and the rest of me is on the draining board, which I have padded with our dog's blanket and the tea cozy. I can't say that I am really comfortable, but there is a depressing smell of carbolic soap, but this is the only part of the kitchen where there is any daylight left, and I've found that sitting in a place where you've never sat before can be inspiring. I wrote my very best poem while sitting on the hen house, though even that isn't a very good poem. I've decided my poetry is so bad that I mustn't write any more of it. By the way, Cassandra is 17 when she's writing this diary. Drips from the roof are plopping into the water butt by the back door. The view from the windows above the sink is excessively dreary. Beyond the dank garden in the courtyard are the ruined walls of the edge of the moat. Beyond the moat, the boggy plowed fields stretch to the leaden sky. I tell myself that all the rain we have had lately is good for nature, and that at any moment spring will surge on us. I try to see leaves on the trees and the courtyard filled with sunlight. Unfortunately, the more my mind's eye sees green and gold, the more drained of all color does the twilight seem. It is comforting to look away from the windows and towards the kitchen fire near where my sister Rose is ironing. though she obviously can't see properly, and it will be a pity if she scorches her only nightgown. I have two, but one is mine that sits behind. Rose looks particularly fetching by firelight because she is a pinkish person. Her skin has a pink glow, and her hair is pinkish gold, very light and feathery. Though I am rather used to her, I know she is beautiful. She is nearly 21 and very bitter with life. I am only 17, look younger, feel older. I am no beauty, but I have a neatish face. We have just remarked to Rose that our situation is really rather romantic. Two girls in this strange and lonely house. She replied that she saw nothing romantic about being shut up in a crumbling old ruin surrounded by a sea of mud. I must admit that our home is an unreasonable place to live in, yet I love it. The house itself was built in the time of Charles II, but it was grafted onto a 14th-century castle that had been damaged by Cromwell. The whole of our east wall was part of the castle. There are two round towers in it. The gatehouse is intact, and a stretch of the old walls at their full height joins it to the house. And Belmont Tower, all that remains of an even older castle, still stands on its mound close by. But I won't attempt to describe the peculiar home fully until I can see more time ahead of me than I do now. I'm writing this journal partly to practice my newly acquired speed writing and partly to teach myself how to write a novel. I intend to capture all of our characters and put in conversations. It ought to be good for my style to dash along without much thought, as up to now my stories have been stiff and self-conscious. The only time Father obliged me by reading one of them, he said I combined stateliness with a desperate effort to be funny. He told me to relax and let the words flow out of me. I wish I knew of a way to make words flow out of Father. Years and years ago, he wrote a very unusual book called Jacob Wrestling, a mixture of fiction, philosophy, and poetry. He had a great success, particularly in America, where he made a lot of money by lecturing on it, and he seemed likely to become a very important writer indeed. But he stopped writing. Mother believed it was due to something that happened before I was about 5. We were living in a small house by the sea at the time. Father had just joined us after his second American lecture tour. One afternoon when we were having tea in the garden, he had the misfortune to lose his temper with Mother very noisily, just as he was about to cut a piece of cake. He brandished the cake knife at her so menacingly that an officious neighbor jumped to the garden fence to intervene and got himself knocked down. Father explained in court that killing a woman with a silver cake knife would be a long, weary business entailing sawing her to death. And he was completely exonerated of any intention of slaying Mother. The whole case seems to have been quite ludicrous, and everyone but the neighbor being very funny, but Father made the mistake of being funnier than the judge, and as there was no doubt whatever that he had seriously damaged the neighbor, he was sent to prison for 3 months. When he came out, he was as nice a man as ever, nicer because his temper was so much better. Apart from that, he didn't seem to me to be changed at all, but Rose remembers that he had already begun to get unsociable. It was then that he took 40 years' lease of the castle, which is an admirable place to be unsociable in. Once we were settled there, he was supposed to write a new book. But time went on without anything happening, and at last we realized that he had given up trying to write. For years now, he has refused to discuss the possibility. Most of the time is spent in the gatehouse room, which is icy cold in the winter, and there is no fireplace. He just huddles over an oil stove. As far as we know, he does nothing but read detective novels from the village library. Miss Marcy, the librarian and schoolmistress, brings them to him. She admires him greatly and says the iron has entered into his soul. Personally, I can't see how the iron could get much farther into a man's soul during only 3 months in jail. Anyway, not if the man has as much vitality as Father had, and he seems to have plenty of it left when they let him out. But it is gone now, and his unsociability has grown almost into a disease. I often think he would prefer not even to meet his own household. All his natural gaiety has vanished. At times he puts on a false cheerfulness that embarrasses me, but usually he is either morose or irritable. I think I should prefer it if he lost his temper as he used to. Oh, poor father, he really is very pathetic. But he might at least do a little work in the garden. I'm aware that this is a fair portrait of him. I must capture him later. Mother died 8 years ago from perfectly natural causes. I think she must have been a shadowy person because I have only the vaguest memory of her and have excellent memory for most things. I can remember the cake knife incident perfectly. I hit the fallen neighbor with my little wooden spade. Father always says that this got him an extra month. 3 years ago, or is it 4 hits, I know, Father's one spasm of sociability was in 1931. A stepmother was presented to us. We were surprised. She is a famous artist model who claims to have been christened Topaz. Even if this is true, there's no law to make a woman stick to a name like that. She's very beautiful, with masses of hair so fair that it is almost white, and a quite extraordinary pallor. She uses no makeup, not even powder. There are 2 paintings of her in the Tate Gallery, one by McMorris called Topaz and Jade, in which she wears a magnificent jade necklace, and one by H.J. Allerdy, which she shows her nude on an old horsehair-covered sofa that she says was very prickly. This so-called composition, this is a so-called composition, but as Allerdy has painted her even paler than she is, decomposition would suit it better. Actually, there's nothing unhealthy about Topaz's palette. It simply makes her look as if she belonged to some new race. She has a very deep voice. That is, she puts one on. It is part of an arty pose, which includes painting and lute playing. But her kindness is perfectly genuine, and so is her cooking. I am very, very fond of her. It is nice to have written that just as she appears in the kitchen stairs, she is wearing her ancient orange tea gown. Her pale, straight hair is flowing down her back to her waist. She paused at the top of the step and said, "Ah, girls," with 3 velvety inflections on each word. Now she is sitting on the steel trivet raking the fire. The pink light makes her look more ordinary, but very pretty. She is 29 and has 2 husbands before Father. She will never tell us very much about them, but she looks extraordinarily young. Perhaps that is because of her expression is so blank. I will stop there. It gives you a general feel for the book. The notion of people living in a castle in a state of degradation, or rather not degradation, but dilapidation, was very appealing to me. It's kind of what I did with Mona of the Manor. They have no money, but they're loving each other, and living with each other and making a go of it. That was the main reason I love the book. There are some men in it, not many. Mostly the women rule the day, and I enjoy that. Cassandra and her sister Rose, and a bunch of others. There's their love interests in it. There's a hot young American, which must have been Dodie Smith's homage to where she was living. It's a book that worships eccentricity and allows poor people to have a castle. And it makes total sense to me that she would write this book in America, pining for England, which is what she was doing. She got back there eventually, and I just never got to go meet her. I will always regret that, always. She was quite a character. So if you've never read I Capture the Castle, I urge you to give it a go. You won't be disappointed, I promise. Many people know about this book, so maybe some of you will have already read it, but it's a joy. And yeah, thank you for coming along for this reading, and I'll see you soon.